the boy everyone believed in. In a peaceful town surrounded by fields and hills lived a young boy named Ethan. From the time he was very young, everyone noticed he was different. He asked thoughtful questions, loved reading books, worked harder than children twice his age, and always finished what he started. While other children played until sunset, Ethan spent hours learning mathematics, history, science, and practical skills from anyone willing to teach him. Farmers admired his work ethic. Shopkeepers praised his honesty. Teachers believed he would someday become one of the most successful people the town had ever known. Every compliment became another expectation resting on his shoulders. At first the praise felt encouraging, but over time it became a burden. Everywhere he went people reminded him how brilliant he was and how they expected him to accomplish something extraordinary. Instead of learning because he loved it, he slowly began learning because he feared disappointing everyone around him. The closer the town's biggest scholarship examination approached, the louder the expectations became. Friends, neighbors, relatives, and even strangers repeated the same words: "You cannot fail." Ethan stopped sleeping well, replaying those words every night. He believed that one mistake would erase years of hard work. Without realizing it, he had stopped focusing on the process and started focusing on everyone watching him. One failure that changed everything. The examination day finally arrived. Ethan entered the hall carrying months of preparation and years of expectations. His heart raced. His hands trembled. Questions that he normally answered with ease suddenly became confusing. Every ticking second felt heavier than the last. Instead of thinking clearly, he imagined the faces of everyone waiting for his success. Panic replaced confidence. When the results were announced weeks later, the impossible happened. Ethan had failed. The town was shocked. Some people expressed sympathy, but many who once praised him suddenly mocked him. Children laughed whenever he walked by. Adults whispered that perhaps he had never been as intelligent as everyone believed. The same mouths that once celebrated him now enjoyed watching him fall. Every trip through town became painful. Ethan locked himself inside his home, avoiding friends and refusing to study. His confidence disappeared. He questioned every dream he had ever held. He believed his future had ended because other people's opinions had become louder than his own inner voice. Days turned into weeks. The laughter echoed in his mind far longer than it echoed in the streets. He became convinced that failure defined him forever. The teacher's unusual lesson. One afternoon Ethan's old teacher visited his home. Instead of offering comforting words, the teacher handed him a wooden bucket filled completely to the brim with water. "Walk through every street in town," the teacher said, "and return without spilling more than a few drops." Confused but respectful, Ethan accepted the challenge. The streets were crowded. People noticed him immediately. Some pointed at him. Others laughed again. A few shouted insults about his failed examination. Children ran beside him trying to distract him. Merchants called out from their shops. Dogs barked. Wagons rolled past. The town was louder than ever before. Yet Ethan barely heard any of it. Every step required complete concentration. His eyes stayed fixed on the surface of the water. His hands remained steady despite the weight of the bucket. Every movement mattered. He carefully adjusted his balance on uneven roads, climbed small hills, crossed bridges, and navigated busy intersections. After what felt like hours, he returned to his teacher with the bucket almost completely full. The teacher smiled and asked, "Tell me every insult people shouted today." Ethan paused. He couldn't remember. "Who laughed at you?" Again, he had no answer. The teacher gently replied, "Exactly. When your mind is completely focused on your purpose, the noise around you becomes too small to control your life." Learning to ignore the noise. That single lesson transformed Ethan more than years of classroom education. The next morning he returned to studying, but this time his motivation had changed completely. He was no longer trying to impress neighbors or silence critics. He studied because learning helped him become better than he had been yesterday. Every distraction became another voice he chose not to follow. Whenever people criticized him, he imagined carrying that bucket of water again. Whenever someone praised him, he imagined the bucket as well. He realized compliments could distract him just as much as criticism. Success required neither applause nor sympathy. It required consistent focus. Month after month he built new habits. He woke before sunrise, exercised his body, strengthened his mind, learned practical skills, read books, accepted mistakes, and treated every setback as another lesson instead of another defeat. The people who once laughed eventually became bored because Ethan no longer reacted. Without attention, criticism slowly disappeared. The town had not changed. Ethan had. He finally understood that the loudest opinions often come from people who are not walking toward any meaningful destination themselves. The real victory. Several years later, another opportunity appeared. Ethan took a new examination, but this time he entered the room carrying something much more valuable than knowledge. He carried peace of mind. There were no expectations to satisfy except his own commitment to do his best. When the results were announced, he finished at the top. The same people who had mocked him suddenly congratulated him again. But something was different. Their praise no longer controlled his happiness, just as their insults no longer controlled his sadness. He thanked them politely and continued working toward even bigger goals. Eventually, Ethan became one of the most respected leaders in the region, not because he had never failed, but because he had learned how to keep walking with his bucket full while the world shouted around him. His greatest lesson was simple: people will always have opinions. Some will cheer for you, others will doubt you, and many will switch sides depending on your latest success or failure. If you spend your life listening to every voice, you will never reach your destination. But if you focus on your purpose with the same attention Ethan gave that bucket of water, the distractions fade into the background. The world becomes quieter, your mind becomes stronger, and your future is built one careful step at a time. Remember this: whenever criticism feels overwhelming, your job is not to answer every voice. Your job is to keep carrying your bucket without spilling what matters most.